Larry Bird was supposed to be washed. The back pain, the lingering injuries, everyone thought the Celtics legend was running on empty. Meanwhile, a 25-year-old Karl Malone was out to take over the league. The mailman was delivering buckets night after night, using his size and strength to bully his way to the rim. But when Malone and the Jazz rolled into Boston in 1989, he was about to learn that Larry Bird wasn't just any fading star. See, the Jazz had never won in Boston with Bird on the court. Not once. And Bird wasn't about to let that change. Not against a young gun who was looking to make a statement at his expense. So, despite the pain and despite the doubts, Bird laced up his sneakers and stepped onto the floor with one mission: to show Karl Malone and the entire NBA that he was still the sheriff in Boston. What happened next? A 40-point showdown that left the Garden rocking and Malone shaking his head in disbelief. Let's break it down. Right from the opening tip, Karl Malone came out with a point to prove. The Jazz wasted no time getting the ball to their bruising power forward, and Malone went straight to work. He planted himself deep in the post, backing down his defender with that brute force, and finished strong off a perfect dime from John Stockton. But if Malone was looking to make a statement, Larry Bird was ready to respond with one of his own. Just seconds later, Bird slipped free from his defender and popped out from the baseline to the elbow, caught the rock, and let it fly. And Bird wasn't just getting buckets, he was setting the table for his teammates too. After a quick board, he whipped a perfect outlet pass to Pinckney, who streaked down the court and finished at the rim. However, the mailman was operating like a machine in the mid-range, catching another Stockton pass, using his body to create just enough space, and drilling the jumper. If Bird was going to trade buckets, Malone was here for it. Yet Bird wasn't just trading buckets, he was putting on a mid-range clinic. Back on the other end, he caught the ball at the top of the key, gave a quick pump fake that sent his defender flying, and calmly rose up to splash a silky smooth jumper. By now, Bird had found his groove. He was feasting from his favorite spots, repeatedly hitting those mid-range jumpers with that unbothered confidence that only Larry Legend could bring. Coming off a pin-down screen, Bird once again found himself at the right elbow, catching and shooting in one fluid motion. The Jazz defense had no answer for his relentless mid-range attack. Even in transition, Bird was punishing the Jazz. Running the floor with Pinckney, Bird got to his spot and delivered yet another mid-range dagger, keeping the pressure on Utah. The Celtics were trying to slow down Stockton by doubling him off the pick and roll, but that strategy backfired. With the defense collapsing on Stockton, Malone had a clear path to the baseline, driving hard to the basket. Meanwhile, the Celtics were struggling to capitalize on their own offensive opportunities. Missed shots and sloppy execution were letting the Jazz get out in transition, and that's where Stockton thrived. Once again, he found Malone in stride, hitting him perfectly on the run for another easy bucket. The Celtics were crowding the paint, trying to clog up the middle and prevent Malone from getting easy looks. But Malone adjusted, slipping to the corner, catching a quick pass, and calmly draining the long two-pointer. On the other end, Bird was facing constant pressure off the pick and roll. The Jazz were doubling him aggressively, forcing the ball out of his hands. But the Celtics' roll man couldn't capitalize on the advantage, and another potential scoring opportunity slipped away. Even without the ball in his hands, Larry Bird was a walking, talking nightmare for the Jazz defense. Bird off-ball movement was causing nightmares for Malone and the Jazz defenders, creating scoring opportunities for himself, making the Jazz pay for every defensive lapse. To start the second quarter, the Jazz defense got caught ball watching, and Bird was as sharp as ever, slipping backdoor along the baseline, catching his man napping, and finishing with ease. Then, off a pin down, Bird created just enough separation to catch the ball at his sweet spot. This time, he didn't just settle for the mid-range only, he went up strong, finishing through contact and drawing the foul. Bird was in that zone where every shot felt like a layup, and the Celtics had all the momentum. Utah had to call a timeout. But even after the break, Bird was still Bird. Off the reset, he found his way to the left elbow, rose up over Bailey, and splashed another mid-range jumper, and he wasn't done. With the Jazz still scrambling to locate him, Bird slipped away from his defender once again, catching the pass and calmly draining the long two-pointer. The Celtics were now up by 3, and Bird was the driving force behind the run. But just as the Celtics seemed to be pulling away, the Jazz responded. With Malone doubled down low, he made the smart play, kicking it out to Edwards at the top of the key. Edwards attacked the space, drew the help, and dropped a slick dime back to Malone for the easy 2. Still, Bird refused to let up. Slipping through the defense once again, he created separation from his man, and rose up for another wide-open look. At that point, Bird was already sitting at 25 points in the first half, and the Jazz looked completely helpless to stop him. The third quarter kicked off with Bird shifting gears, going from relentless scorer to savvy facilitator. It was a subtle but significant adjustment. Instead of hunting for his own shot, Bird began orchestrating the offense, moving the ball around, and creating scoring opportunities for his teammates. The Celtics were finally starting to capitalize, knocking down the open looks Bird was setting up. But even as a playmaker, Bird was still a scoring threat. With defenders draped all over him, he was getting just enough separation to unleash his signature fadeaway, and it was money. No matter how tightly the Jazz guarded him, Bird kept finding ways to create space and knock down tough shots. Meanwhile, Malone was still a wrecking ball in the paint, spinning, pivoting, powering his way to the rack. The Celtics had no answers for his brute strength and relentless aggression. But Boston wasn't done. In transition, Bird found himself as the receiver for once, sprinting down the floor, catching the outlet pass, and charging straight to the cup. No fadeaway this time, just a strong, assertive drive to the rack, finishing through traffic for another 2 points. It was a rare display of explosiveness from a guy who had been battling back pain all season, and it pushed his total to 31 points while extending the Celtics' lead to 7. But just when it seemed like the Celtics were pulling away, Malone continued to impose his will down low. Even with defenders hanging on him, he was muscling his way to the basket, absorbing contact, and still finishing with power. And he wasn't just a problem inside, he was also feeling it from mid-range, creating just enough space to rise up and drain another jumper. The Jazz were relentless in transition, attacking before the Celtics' defense could get set. Malone was feasting down low, using his strength and positioning to rack up easy points in the paint. The Celtics' 7-point cushion had quickly evaporated, and by the end of the quarter, Utah had sliced the lead down to just 3 points. Malone was in full beast mode now, attacking the rim with reckless abandon and bulldozing through the Celtics' interior defense. The final quarter was all about grit for the Celtics. They were turning defense into offense, and Larry Bird was pulling up from beyond the arc. But with Bird already having done so much damage, the Celtics started to work inside. Kevin McHale was drawing in the defense, and with the Jazz scrambling, McHale found Robert Parrish down low for the easy bucket. Still, Malone wasn't backing down. With the Celtics crowding the paint, Utah kicked it out to Malone, who was left wide open beyond the arc. Despite Malone's relentless attack, the Celtics still held on to a 111-107 lead. But with time winding down, they needed one more dagger to seal it, and of course, they went back to Bird. Off a pin down, Bird curled to the left elbow, caught the pass, and let it fly. By the final buzzer, Bird had poured in 40 points to Malone's 39. But here's the kicker. Malone got 17 trips to the free throw line compared to Bird's 7, yet Bird still outscored him by a point. That was Larry Legend, efficient, ruthless, and unstoppable when it mattered most. The Celtics took down the Jazz 113-109 in a game that was less about the scoreboard and more about a message. But what's remarkable about this game isn't just the 40 points or clutch shots, it's that Larry Bird did it all with a back that should have ended his career. By 1989, Bird was a shell of himself physically. The explosiveness was gone, every step looked painful, yet he was still out there giving Karl Malone absolute nightmares. Most players would have called it quits with the kind of back issues Bird was dealing with. But Bird kept it under wraps, refusing to show the pain, refusing to make excuses. To the fans, he was still Larry Legend, unstoppable, ice-cold, and relentless. That's what makes this performance iconic. Bird wasn't just battling the Jazz, he was battling his own body, pushing through pain that would have sidelined most players. Yet here he was, dropping 40 points and reminding everyone that as long as he could stand, Boston was still his house. For Malone, it was a harsh reminder. No matter how strong or dominant he was still chasing a man who refused to be caught. On that night, Larry Bird wasn't just playing to win. He was playing to prove that even on a bad back, he was still the boss. If you love hearing about epic NBA battles like this one, make sure to like and subscribe for more unforgettable moments from the hardwood. You don't want to miss what's coming up next.